don't hate Hexen 2. I actually mostly like it. It's a lot better than the first game in every way, except maybe if you enjoy being annoyed and confused, and even then, Hexen 2 has you covered. It wasn't supposed to be called Hexen 2 originally, just like they wanted to go beyond Heretic. The next game from Raven Software was supposed to go beyond Hexen, but original Heretic Hexen series producer John Romero had recently departed from id Software so he could go do an Ion Storm, and the franchise was now in the hands of Activision. See, in 1997, Raven was bought by Activision. And maybe it sounds like I'm repeating myself because I've told this story more times than I've lent a superlative to Zuckerberg bully and dimension-binding tech sprite John Carmack. But the founding members of Raven Software, who were responsible for the first Heretic and Hexen games, walked after the acquisition. They all left to found Human Head Studios, and if you want to know the terrible story that followed that, check out the Prey video. I'm not saying that the COD mines are a better fate, but they're a simpler and less bizarre form of torture than the Prey 2 saga. Activision decided that Heretic and Hexen were not part of the same series because they were different enough to be their own thing, which is fair, although Activision saying it is enough to convince me that it might be bullshit. Which is why we have a Hexen 2 and a Heretic 2 instead of John Romero Presents Hecatomb. Hexen 2, unlike the first, is based on an advanced version of the Quake engine, if you couldn't tell from the warpy models and the chunky pixels, and for this video I'm using the Hammer of Therion source port, which is pretty much the go-to option and is a good and decent port. Yes, quite nice, except for one thing that I'll talk about in a bit that chaps my ass harder than the desert sun. Hexen 2 actually has a cutscene, yes, one introductory cutscene to introduce the story and recap the other games in the series.
Years ago, on a world whose name is now forgotten.
Oh, wait, I know this one. Parthoris. I saved that place twice and y'all forgot its name. The narrator remembers a single elf, who I assume wasn't named Corvus yet. It took 4 games for Raven to name a character Corvus. Anyway, this narrator talks about the events of Heretic and Hexen and the slaying of the first 2 Serpent Riders, with still only Desperal riding a serpent. Yeah, that's the one.
Now the darkness has come to Therion. Eidolon, the last and most powerful of the Serpent Riders, is ravaging our once peaceful world. Fearful, demoralized, and unable to regroup, the populace of Therion fell quickly before the dreaded march of Eidolon's vile golems. Machinations created for only one purpose.
Oh, hey, Civvy.
Hi, Cancer Mouse.
Do you know what a golem is, Civvy?
Please don't. I just got out of the clown room. I don't want to deal with this.
A golem is a creature of Jewish folklore created from clay to do the bidding of...
Can we just skip ahead to the important part of this where you say that the destruction of Therion was a Jewish conspiracy?
The destruction of Therion was a Jewish conspiracy.
By a serpent rider.
Yup.
Who doesn't ride a serpent?
It's a metaphorical serpent. Like the devil.
I have a force field now. How do you keep getting in here?
They let me in here. They said the algorithm requires engagement.
Yeah, that tracks.
The attack was skillfully executed, and all 4 continents had fallen by midday.
Yes, very skillful.
It was a sad time for our once noble world, and many were forced into hiding to avoid death. Now, Therion huddles in fear. Eidolon sits gloating and untouched in his dark tower.
Oh, for Christ's sake, don't bring the Dark Tower into this whole mess. We'll be hip-deep in invisible sex demons. You see, in the 1980s, Stephen King did 50% of the world's supply of cocaine. But there are other worlds than these. I'm doing this playthrough with the Necromancer because it's my favorite of the bunch. It's not like in the first game where I wanted a character that didn't rely on melee for the first parts of the game. All the classes in Hexen 2 start with a melee weapon, and the Paladin wins that contest with his fists. That is awesome. And he doesn't get ranged weapons until the second hub unless you use the Tome of Power with the Vorpal Sword. Yeah, Tome of Power's back in after being absent from the first Hexen. I'm glad it's here. The Paladin also has an axe that fires more axes, and these weapons can be used when you have no mana as strictly melee weapons. And also this staff, which is a rapid-fire energy weapon and a rocket launcher when powered up. The Crusader has a hammer for melee. After that, he's got an ice staff, which powers up into an ice storm, followed by some kind of meteor launcher, which powers up into a tornado of meteors, and the Purifier, which is a beam of light that powers up into more beams of light. The assassin has a knife, a crossbow, sticky bombs, and the Staff of Set. The staff is a little weird to use because the attack charges, and the Tome of Power turns it into some Hellraiser shit. But the assassin is also more or less geared towards stealth play, because one of the abilities you can get is being able to hide in shadows. The other is a powerful backstab. I can't speak to how well this works because I have rarely played as the assassin. Each class has its own perks and stats that you unlock by leveling up. Yes, we have real honest-to-God RPG mechanics this time around, but they're light and it's not like you're going to be fucking around with a skill tree. These abilities all happen automatically. The Paladin class can get the ability to not drown underwater, which is almost entirely useless throughout the Hexen 2 campaign. The other ability is Divine Intervention, which will bring you back from death, which is statistically 100% more useful than not being able to drown in this game. And the Crusader gets Revivification, which will grant some small health boosts while fighting, as well as Holy Strength, which is a temporary buff. Like in Hexen 1, there's an inventory item that also works differently depending on what class you use. The Glyph of the Ancients is like a grenade when thrown by the Paladin, a time bomb when placed by the Crusader, and with the Assassin it's... What the fuck? Yeah, I haven't played much as the Assassin. I am using the Necromancer, and we'll get into his weapons and abilities. Unlike in Hexen 1, I love the magic class and his weapons. The first hub of the game takes place in familiar medieval fantasy territory, castles, countryside, and it wouldn't be a fantasy game if you weren't constantly fighting giant spiders. If this show had a giant spider count, this game would overload it, because I think every single level has giant spiders. And also bigger giant spiders with more health, because, you know, you can reskin an enemy and make it harder, and that's enemy variety right there, you know? And these spiders have the Quake logo on them, which means they're 4 times as poisonous, I think. Since I start off with one of the weaker melee weapons, the Sickle, because the Necromancer isn't a physically strong character, so it takes 1 or 2 more hits than another class would. This isn't much of a problem once you get a magic weapon 3 rooms from now. Until then, try to follow along because I've mastered the puzzles of Hexen 2. Mostly. They're like second nature to me, and they're not just hitting switches in giant, confusingly designed levels. They all make sense. Sometimes, in a LucasArts adventure game kind of way. First, you deal with the giant spiders, then the night archers, simple, low-tier enemies, and by the end of the first map, you're also dealing with skull wizards who teleport and spawn tiny giant spiders when they die. They're annoying, but not too difficult. You know, until the game reskins them later and gives them more health and makes them teleport even more, because if they do an annoying thing, you can always make them do an annoying thing more and call it difficulty. In the first room, you can find a note from Tyrannith, whose journey you'll follow throughout the game. He visits all the same places you do and tells you what's going on. You know, so you're not completely in the dark as to what you're supposed to do. Famine, the first apocalyptic rider we'll have to face, is guarded by an invincible crystal golem, and the Brotherhood of Hunger might know something about how to destroy it, and you have to get their amulet from the castle treasury. Remember this in an hour because it has fuck all to do with what you're going to be doing for a while. You get your second weapon pretty quickly, the magic missiles, balls of death that present my only complaint about this port, or any port I've tried to use, which is that the transparency on the projectile is broken and I have no idea how to fix it. I looked for ways to fix it and nothing works, so it's gonna look like that. Please leave a comment about how you easily fixed it with the help of a Reddit post from 2012. Look at his hand as he's casting that. He's doing Spider-Man shit, I love it. This first section of the game has 3 maps, Black Marsh, the Mill, and Barbican. You have to run between the 3 of them to collect items and do magic stuff to progress. Off the top of my head, from memory, I can tell you the exact sequence of events. You could first take a teleporter under this bridge, but not on this skill. I need more mana before I try that. So I go and clear out the mill area, grab some more mana, even green mana, which I won't be able to use until the next section of the game because I won't get a weapon that uses it. Maybe the 3rd slot weapon is in a secret I haven't found in 25 years of playing, but I'm not going to find it now. There are a lot of little upgrades to the Quake engine, like destructible things in the environment, breaking open barrels and boxes for items. I'm still not comfortable with the amount of mana I have yet, so I go to the Barbican to grab some and get past the wall in the coolest way possible. Oh, there's a Crater of Might. Like in the first game, that refills your mana. So I return to the underwater teleporter and raid the tomb of Lorik because I need his bones. But now I have to go back to the Barbican, have a swim, kill the hydras in the water, which can squirt ink at you, and because of how dark this game is, sometimes you might not be able to tell. Enter the Barbican from the sewer, and then you're faced with archers and a haunted ballista. Medieval gun pedants, please leave a comment about how it's not a ballista, but it's actually a Mach 11. Break this wall of face, spiders. I really hate the giant spiders in this game! And I'm low on mana again because on the harder skills it can be hard to come by in any reliable quantity for many sections of the game. As soon as I find some, I encounter the Archer reskin, called the Archer Lord. Which is like the Archer, with worse projectiles, better aim, and 4 times the health. And you'd think such a bland enemy couldn't be my least favorite in the game, but just you wait until they've almost completely replaced the regular flavor of archers in the late game. It takes like 15 hits from the magic missiles to kill them, 30 blue mana, and I picked up 45 blue mana, and there's 3 more regular archers in this room I can't do anything about because I have no long-range attacks. I wish I had some glyphs. This game also has a weird, somewhat more RPG-like armor system that I don't quite understand. Each class benefits differently from the armor pickups, and they can sometimes deflect attacks for the assassin, but it's not a straight this item soaks up this % of oncoming damage. Don't say read the manual, Civvy, because I did, and the information there is just as vague. So here's a thing that I know now, but probably frustrated me greatly when I first played this game. You need to find a secret door behind some vases in order to hop onto a non-haunted ballista so you can destroy a tower that will reveal a teleporter that takes you to a ledge inside the castle with the mill key, which you use to get into the mill, grind up Lorik's bones, and use that in the Black Marsh to make a potion of mithril transmutation. And that'll turn a wall underwater in the Barbican into wood so you can smash it and get the castle key. Okay, now that we're actually in the castle, the Amulet of Hunger and Invincible Crystal Golem stuff has some relevance. The regular golems start to show up here too, but they're not too much of a threat, until the game reskins them later and buffs them. Same with the imps, which fly around annoyingly and shoot fire. Now we have to go after the Amulet of Hunger, except we can't because there's a magic barrier in front of the palace and we can't get in. Now that I've reached level 3, I've gained the Soul Stealing ability, which activates randomly when you kill an enemy and lets you pick up their fucking soul for some health and mana. Badass. Doesn't work on sheep, at least not yet, because Hexen 2 is dedicated, for the moment, to not being as cryptic as Hexen 1. You can find messages that point you in the right direction. The Altar of Hunger is hidden in a shop, but you can't get near it without the amulet. My instincts for playing this game tell me to go to the stables, another map in the hub, because I know I need stuff there, and even if I don't, clearing it out now will help me later. I have some glyphs now, which are best when used by the Necromancer because they're basically homing missiles. Now, what I need from the stables is the treasury key, which luckily is buried by the tree in the forge. The game can randomly break and place it somewhere else, but I got lucky. Upstairs, I can find a shovel, because despite being able to raise the dead with an ability that was cut from this game in development, moving dirt still requires some elbow grease. My digging pays off. I have the treasury key. I still can't get into the fucking treasury. I need the stable key too, but you're a fool if you think I'd find that in the stables. We go to another level in the hub, the inner courtyard, where most of the action is gonna happen. There's a nice guillotine here that does a little more than decapitation. There's a thing I can't do yet because there are invisible forces at work here. If only you could see what lies beyond the wall in front of you. Yeah, we'll get to that. I need the stable key for that. Those damn buffed archers guard this room, and I have no mana, so I use the seal of the Avenomancer. Yes, it's just like the Morphovim Heretic and the Porculator and Hexen, but I get so much more satisfaction out of using it against these spongy bastards. Our next stop is hidden behind the guillotine platform. Yes, this isn't a secret level, it's the Forgotten Chapel. So forgotten it's full of fucking monsters! To be fair, if you go into the underground tunnels, you'll find a message from a man named Anton that tells you exactly how to get there. Anton plans to escape there instead of being jibbed. And if you read a headstone outside one of the buildings later on, you can find out that this plan didn't work. Into the chapel, into another underground waterway, and under the altar you see a shitload of spiders and a body encased in webs. Destroying this body gets you the stable key. No, wait, my mistake, it gets you the tailor's key. Wait, where the fuck does that go? The tailor's shop is in the outer courtyard, and there's a wooden box with a metal door, and you break the wood inside the tailor's closet to get a magic disruption spell that'll let you into the palace, finally. where I get stuck in a pool that I can't climb out of, so I have to use the Chaos device to go back to the map start. They put items down there and everything. This is bullshit, and I remember even the Win95 version of Hexen 2 was like this. Thankfully, I have the treasury key so I can get the Amulet of Hunger and get to the altar. But I don't really need to, because it tells me something I already know, and it doesn't tell me where the fucking stable key is because I forgot. It's actually behind a secret fireplace in the stables that I forgot about. It's not that well hidden, but a cursory scan of the room from the entrance might not reveal it. What you're supposed to do is use the stable key to get into the stable proper because it's the only place you can get a pile of sand. No, I'm not joking. You take the pile of sand to the forge in the stables to turn it into a bead of glass and then return to another secret passage in a fireplace. This one has a message that says this fireplace is unusual. To place it against a grindstone, which makes a lens that lets you see behind a magic wall in the inner courtyard, which will lead you to an archway that you can pass through that lets you kill the crystal golem and get to Famine's lair. Famine is the easiest boss, which is good because you're not exactly well equipped to deal with anything. He dies with a cool 1997 light show. 1 horseman down, 3 to go. Our player is magically teleported to the next area, Mazera. Okay, there is a lot of fucking lava in this section of the game. Like, a lot. Like, I don't know if the cultures of South America dealt with this much lava, but good lord, it's everywhere. Temples surrounded by lava. And the Quake Engine's slippery movement screws with me hard during this section. Oh, and for this portion of the game, the role of the giant spiders will be portrayed instead by slightly more dangerous giant scorpions. Tyrannith has another helpful note for us.
Our defenses have fallen. The key to our magic is in the hands of the evil. Death has captured the 4 elements and spread them throughout the realm. Defended by were-jaguars and scorpions, the elements must be reclaimed to extend the Bridge of Stars.
This is probably the simplest hub of the game, maybe even the least challenging. Although, we gotta talk about the were-jaguars. Fast, sword-swinging, loud, obnoxious bastards who go into some kind of invincibility state sometimes, where they roar, although conspicuously going into it less in this port than I'm used to, and instead they're invincible when they crouch. They're a time and mana sink that I get pretty tired of after the first 5 or 6 of them that I have to fight. In the first map, the were-jaguars hurt like hell, and I'm still rocking a ring of regeneration from the last hub. When they hit you, you can see chunks of your own flesh coming off. They're easily the fastest and most agile enemies in the game, and thankfully after you're done with this hub, you'll never see them again. Until then, though. So what you're doing in this section of the game is finding 4 elements to place at the Bridge of Stars. There are some other items you need, but I found that the level design kinda naturally leads you to them. You've got to do 4 trials: fire, water, earth, and air. Fire is right near the start of the whole mess, and that isn't lava. It hurts, but not as much as lava. And now that I have the 3rd necromancer weapon, the bone shards, one of my absolute favorite weapons because it's like firing a machine gun that shoots bones. If you're paying close attention, you'll notice that the projectiles are not what's hitting the enemy. The bone shards are a hit scan weapon that'll make contact as soon as you start firing. And because it fires in bursts, you won't always be able to control how much you're firing. And since Hexen 2 has enemies with solid corpses, you'll end up jibbing them a lot. Accidentally. Oh, and now that I've reached level 6, I have the Necromancer's other ability, Vampiric Drain, which will occasionally grab some health back from enemies. Occasionally. If you're using the sickle. To open up a couple of doors in the first area, you need to go to the Obelisk of the Moon and find the ornamental stone key, which will basically open up every area you need to get to in this hub, which releases more were-jaguars. You motherfuckers! The right door you unlock leads to the Test of Fire. It's platforming and hitting 3 switches. That's it. But it does directly lead you into the Court of 1,000 Warriors. God damn it! That's the icon of the Defender, the invulnerability power-up. I need as many of those as I can get. Deeper into this map, you'll find the Jade Skull, one of the 2 skulls you need to access another map from Obelisk of the Moon, Square of the Stream, where you do the Test of Water. The only place that could conceivably benefit from the Paladin's no drowning skill. Except I still have a ring of water breathing from the previous hub, so I'm fine. And there's your water element. In the same map, you need to find the Serpent's Heart, which is easy enough because the level design in Hexen 2, especially in this hub, is much simpler. Grab the Serpent's Heart from a nearby crypt, place it on an altar for the other skull you need, and it also spawns a Skull Wizard. I unwisely decided to show off the Summoning Stone artifact here. Yeah, cool, big demon to come and fight with you, who will attack where the Skull Wizard was before he teleported. And because he senses danger, he doesn't teleport back until the demon is gone. Yeah, give me your soul. This map gives us everything we need to get to the Palace of Columns, which for some reason has another hub exit back to the Court of Thousand Warriors to an isolated area with the Trial of Earth in it, which is Crushers.
Bullshit.
Okay, back to the Palace of Columns, which leads to the Tomb of the High Priest, one of our last stops for the episode, where we can get the first piece of our Slot 4 weapon. They come in 2 pieces in Hexen 2 instead of 3 in Hexen 1, because Hexen 2 is less interested in wasting my time. And also the Trial of Air, which is Crushers again. Look, it was 1997, the technology wasn't there for all 4 elements to be represented properly in gaming. That same year, however, film could represent 5 of them. So that's all the elements. A quick trip back through the Obelisk of the Moon takes us to the Bridge of Stars, where we place the elements to go off and fight death. I forgot the other piece of the Slot 4 weapon was here, so now we can put that together to get the Raven Staff. And kids, the primary fire of the Raven Staff, I could take it or leave it. You'll see it a bit later, but it's not very interesting. For now, it's time for part 1 in a series that may never have a part 2, Humiliating Death! The game is nice enough to give you a Ring of Flight for this battle, and let me just show you the majesty of the powered-up Raven Staff.
Hitchcock would be proud.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Wraith Verge that the Cleric in Hexen carries, but it's better. But this isn't the humiliating part. No, I decided instead of wasting all my mana, I'd embarrass the Reaper the only way a necromancer whose ability to raise the dead was cut during development could. I'm gonna kill him with a mortal sickle. Later, boner. And again, we are whisked away to another ancient land, this time towards the desert temples of Thysis, the Egypt section. This section of the game is infamous for a very good reason. I've been playing Hexen 2 for a goddamn quarter century and I can only barely explain how this inexplicable bullshit works. The last hub was the simplest of the bunch, and this one is easily the most convoluted pile of dry camel shit in the series. This makes the 7 portals look like a maze on the back of a Denny's placemat. As for the general new things introduced in this section, ice imps, like fire imps but more annoying and can freeze you. Not that that happens often. Mummies. There we go, bone them out of existence. Mummies aren't as much of a problem as were-jaguars, until they start using their staff to send nearly instant death fire attacks at you. The same ones you might remember the Molitor having, except now in a 3D engine and coming from a mid-tier enemy. The 2 things you're supposed to collect in order to reach the boss, Pestilence, are the upper and lower crowns of Egypt. According to Tyrannith, for the sake of honor, both crowns must be returned to their resting place. You know I just killed Death, right? That's only 2 things, except to get those you have to get a Serpent's Eye Gem, 4 Canopic Jars, the Dark Pharaoh's Staff, the Staff of Nepherdom, the Scarab of Time, several different keys, you have to set a sundial to high noon, and the stars have to be aligned in a certain way in 2 different time periods. That last part isn't a joke. That's not a fucking joke. The stars have to be properly fucking aligned to beat this section of the game, and there is time travel. Why am I bothering with any of this if there's time travel? I swear to God, this section traumatized me. I'm going to apologize to Katie ahead of time because this is going to be a nightmare to make sense of in editing, but I will get through it. Even in my sometimes holistic approach to talking about video games, I am absolutely dumbfounded attempting to know where to even begin with this nonsense. Let's start with the Scarab of Time, which you can find in the Palace of the Pharaoh, underwater, in a tiny box, through a dark pipe, which you might mistake for being nothing because there's one just like it on the other side of the room that goes nowhere. And in order to access it, you have to press this secret button. Then you go to the Temple of Nefertum and open a secret wall next to the Constellation Wheel that you need the Staff of Nefertum for. But we're not anywhere close to that yet, not by a mile. We have to travel 1,000 years into the past and break a wall to get to the Shrine of Naus. But we also need to find the Guardian Key, which will seem like a cruel afterthought when I tell you what's behind that cursed fucking door. I accidentally turned the Constellation Wheel once when dealing with all the enemies in the Ancient Wheel Room, and this is incredibly important later. You see, because some asshole named Ammon said a long time ago that only when the ages of the wheel align with each equinox will Upper and Lower Egypt unite.
Ah, a great feat, one only Menes himself could accomplish.
You shut the fuck up, Ramses! You shut the fuck up! Shut up! And so in the Shrine of Naus, I can see a key I need, so I jump over there, but like several places in this hub, and only in this hub, there's an invisible wall blocking me because I need to do some dumb bullshit first before it lets me get it. In this case, you have to press a piece of a wall that opens a door that leads to a teleporter that takes you onto the statue's lap to get the key. The Guardian Key gives me a rough-cut gem, which I need in the Temple of Anubis 1,000 years from now so it can be cut into a serpent's eye gem. And you place that in front of a statue of a snake, and it makes the snake statue come to life, and you kill it and you get a canopic jar. The canopic jars, right? You need those in the Palace of the Pharaoh so you can place them on an altar behind a secret door. And one of the canopic jars is in the Palace of the Pharaoh behind a secret door that opens. I don't know how or why this secret door opens. The third canopic jar I need is in a room that I need the Dark Pharaoh's scepter to open, and after playing this game for 25 years, I could not tell you where that is if you put a gun to my head. Maybe in the Palace of the Pharaoh. Nope, it's in the Pyramid of Anubis. Is this it? Up there? In this room where the floor falls out from under you under a pit of spikes? No, it's behind this secret wall with a bloody handprint that you push to hit a switch to lower it, so it's clipping into the fucking wall. And that pit of spikes doesn't kill you. You're supposed to go down there. But that leaves one more canopic jar. Where is that? Let's go back to where I got that rough-cut gem 1,000 years ago. And Hexen 2's most infamous puzzle. I call it a puzzle, but it's really more of a trap meant to confuse the player and get them to abandon the game. So you come upon 9 touch plates. So back in the Shrine of Naus, there was a wall with a certain pattern on it. Here's a picture of it. It has 3 correct combinations of touch plates that'll let you get across this room to get the canopic jar. So let's just use one and... But the combination changes every time you use the fucking thing, so all you can do is randomly try one of these over and over and over again, and there's no reason any player would understand how this works.
And he ripped that beast and he killed him dead, and the bees made honey in the lion's head. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I'd burn this whole building down. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would burn this building down.
That's not even the end, but it's the worst of it in this playthrough. In the Pharaoh's tomb, you have to make a sundial point to 12 o'clock so that the Staff of Nefertum can be accessed in the first area, but you can also grab the first crown out of the treasure room. Once you've got the staff, it's only a matter of aligning the constellation wheel in both timelines, and here's a fun thing. There's a message in the Pyramid of Anubis that says the constellation the game told you to point to for the equinox in the present was actually bullshit, and it's 2 steps over. Great! Turns out the last time I was in the ancient temple 1,000 years ago, I accidentally set the wheel correctly, so when I do it in the present, the crown appears and I can finally get out of Egypt. All I have to do is kill Pestilence, which I do without much trouble, even if my health is being sapped the whole time. I should be happy that we're out of Egypt and the game's worst puzzles are behind us. But I'm not, because now we're into the ancient Greece section, and you remember how I said the game was going to start using the Archer Lords exclusively instead of the regular ones? The Archer Lords with 4 times as much health? Yeah, this is difficulty, right? I'm using an invisibility power up here because I know what's in this hedge maze. Every hub has its own special enemy, and Greece has Medusa. And for those of you sad that you're not going to see the Demoness in this episode, well, here are some monster titties for you. They'll turn you to stone. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, of course she shoots homing projectiles. Hold on, there's a bunch of hidden switches in this section that give you little bonuses once you get to the last map. We're back to giant spiders too, the tanky ones, not the quake bottom ones. The amount of time I spend shooting at Archer Lords far outweighs the time I spend solving puzzles. And I think it's unfair to call some of these puzzles because mostly it's collecting items and bringing them to places. I learned that when the camera changes because the game is showing you a thing that the Switch did, that's not pausing the game and I'm still being eaten by spiders. And then sometimes it bugs out and I can see my HUD weapon and it's stuck like that going through the wrong animation. I don't know, I'm bored. This whole section is just kind of boring, plotting, not very fun. Fuck! I was so bored I tried to melee Medusa just to see what happens. She headbutts! She headbutts! Right now I'm trying to get a couple of metal bars to give as offerings at the reflecting pool. Do not go into the reflecting pool. Future Civvy here. One of the patrons told me that I could get out of this by using the swim up button. I didn't even think of that because having a dedicated control to go slightly higher out of a pool instead of just letting me use jump like a normal game, when it's useful as often as the paladin's no drowning ability, no, bullshit. I have to crouch in this room or else. Wow, only one Archer Lord. Why take it easy on me in a trap like that, Hexen 2? This section doesn't have to be boring, but the insistence on making all of the enemies extremely spongy to the point that I'm using Tomes of Power just to speed things up, yeah, it makes this pretty tedious, but thankfully the puzzles and item collection aren't very hard. All the messages have the same texture, which is in Latin for some reason, and it translates to, "Death awaits you with great sharp teeth."
No Python.
Shut up! Why? Why is it always Holy Grail, you fucking nerds? So I get the gold bar that lets me into this place and find out that I need the Diamond Scepter and the Crown of Kings, which are in the Baths of Demetrius. The crown isn't even a puzzle, I just jump onto a ledge and crouch. The staff is a puzzle, but the game tells you the order you need to press the switches in a message right at the start. After that, you're in the final level of Ancient Greece where you have to pick up and place 3 stones to open the portal and kill War. These stones are guarded by shadow wizards, a particularly irritating reskin of the regular wizards I talked about before. They're not really threatening, they just take a lot of time to deal with. I had very little to say about the boxy mazes full of unnecessarily resilient enemies. This section has maybe 3 entries in my notes, and one of those is about monster titties, so let's move on to War, the hardest of the generals. You'd think that death would be the hardest, but War spams you with spinning homing axes that can instantly kill you, and then taunt you with a punny death message. Jesus, is this over yet? I end up using all my invulnerability power-ups, a pair of speed boots, some tomes of power, and even a summoned demon to defeat him. And once again, we're teleported to the faraway land of Blackmarsh? So you know we've schlepped across 4 continents and time traveled 1,000 years into the past and been petrified by big snake titties? Well, according to Tyrannith, who walked this path before us, none of that mattered. None of it. Not a single thing, because Eidolon used his magic chaos sphere to resurrect the 4 horsemen we just killed again. So I can assume he's just gonna do that again, and we're right back to Black Marsh where we started, except now all the enemies are harder and in some cases total bullshit. The Fallen Angel, and by extension the reskinned Fallen Angel Lord, are the worst common enemies you'll have to deal with in the whole game. The Lord especially, because it has a nasty laser attack and is semi-invisible. Neither of them are good, and they can go into a state where they deflect projectiles back at you, because it didn't take long enough to kill the Archer Lords that are also still common in this hub. I miss when it was just golems. The second map of this section is a mage tower, and I hope you either designed this level or already know that you have to chop this tapestry away in order to progress. Up in this mage's office? Yeah, his office. There's some sheet music you need for a piano in the first map, so you can reach an absolutely stupid number of Archer Lords. You might not notice it, but this is the brute squad that killed Tyrannith, and there's a teleporter back to the chapel so you can get a defiled holy relic so you can re-bless that and bring it back, which will move the altar and lead to... A good portion of this last hub is sewers. I need the Mage's Tome, which is back in the Mage's Tower, which the sewer opens up into from another passage, and when you use that, another floor of the tower magically opens up so you can go get a golden sphere that'll help power a thing, and all of this feels like unnecessary busy work at this point, and I would really like to kill that final serpent rider that doesn't ride a serpent. Not yet. We've got one more level, Eidolon's Ordeal, a collection of traps that isn't even as hard as like half of the rest of the levels in this game. Grab a key, and finally, after all of this, it's time to face Eidolon. I don't usually have a problem with Eidolon. He's a simple 2-stage boss. You shoot at him, the Chaos Sphere comes out and makes him giant like he's a Power Rangers villain. You destroy the Chaos Sphere, then you shoot at Eidolon a bunch more and he dies. This doesn't take into account his projectiles that can nearly instantly kill you, his fireballs that can nearly instantly kill you, his lightning that can instantly kill you, and then sometimes he turns you into a sheep. I spent more time than I'd like to admit fighting Eidolon, a boss that had come fairly easy to me in the past, and came to the conclusion that there isn't enough mana offered at the start of this level to kill him on the hardest skill, unless you get a little more creative with damage output, and by that I mean hitting him with as many ravens as you can, filling up your mana with the Crater of Might at the correct time, and judicious use of Tomes of Power. There's a wall of text for an ending because despite having an opening cutscene, they didn't quite have the budget to close the game out with animations of an old man writing. And like every one of these games, there's a cliffhanger at the end where some evil force appears, and I think that the evil force is probably the boss of Portal of Pravis. Oh, shit. You all wanted this. Okay, like 10 people probably wanted this, and the rest of you don't really care, which is a perfectly healthy outlook, and I hope it stays with you. Your life will be better if you pay no mind to Portal of Pravis. It's not bad exactly, but it's a slog. And here, I'm even playing with the Demoness so we can have a nice view of her weapons and abilities. I've played through this expansion maybe once before. I don't remember it. I never really pay much attention to expansion packs, because when they're not made for build engine games or done by good studios, they're usually pretty boring retreads of the main game, and there's not all that much to talk about. Portal of Pravis has 2 hubs, and most of it is almost completely linear. I'm talking picking up artifacts that I would need to open doors I haven't even come to yet, kind of negating the entire point of locking them. That's not to say that there aren't real puzzles, because there are closer to the end. There's even a couple of in-game cutscenes done inside the old Quake 1 engine. They're hilarious. Just look.
Eidolon, the last of the Serpent Riders, is defeated by 4 unlikely companions. The Paladin, the Assassin, the Crusader, the Necromancer, the Etten, the Macron, the Man with No Name, the Invisible Man, the Grease Man, the 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. Months have passed and strange winter besets the land.
And here's the Demoness, Eidolon's minion, who is troubled by this strange magic, and then a hole opens up in the ground and they all jump in. And then I attempt to understand the Demoness's starting weapon, which isn't melee, although has a conspicuously short range that can't always reach across a room, and because it's ranged, it's weak as shit. Her other weapons are better. The acid spell shoots balls of acid, the firestorm spell kind of works like the firestorm spell in Hexen 1, and the Tempest staff shoots balls of lightning, until it's powered up and then it's a lightning gun from Quake. The opening cutscene doesn't tell you this, but Pravis is an evil wizard who wants to resurrect the Serpent Riders. Yes, all of them. We can't let that happen. So we go off to chase this wizard man who's gonna resurrect this big bad guy from the last game, and oh god damn it, it's Blood 2 again! It's always Blood 2 again! We chase him through the Duke's castle. This is mostly boring and a retread of what we've seen in Hexen 2, including Angel Lords, which I was really hoping to avoid. When I say the design is simple, I mean that I'll walk up to a random thing, like this throne with a skeleton on it, and a big door will open and poof, that's it. I'm at the end of this hub. Feels like it just started because I barely stopped to take a breath. I mean, sure, it's been an hour of game time, but this is also an expansion I played once and remember nothing about. I'm not sure if I can call it bad when I know what I'm doing and where I'm supposed to go, but it sure doesn't feel like Hexen. Then at the end of the first hub, everything falls apart. This is the Yak Man. Here is the Yak Man hitting me with one chunk of ice that takes away 75 hit points and freezes me. The Yak Man has states where he blocks attacks entirely, which is fine, I'm used to that, but he doesn't fucking bleed. He rarely goes into a pain state, so being able to tell when he's immune to your attacks relies on knowing this expansion well, which I don't. In fact, after this video is done, I'll probably never play it again, and I like Hexen 2. The Yak Man, while fun to say, is not fun to fight. So the second and final hub of Portal of Pravis is full of Yak Men, and other obnoxious new enemies. Pentacles are cave-dwelling blobs that jump at you and explode. They always come in groups and have no reason to exist. The most common enemy will be Ice Archers, who thankfully only have the health pool of the regular archers. A few hits from the acid and a negligible 2 hits from the firestorm take care of them. The expansion is long enough for the Demoness to level up 5 times and gain her special abilities. First is Demon Glide at level 3, which is kinda cool and helps with platforming, and Masochistic Mana, which will regenerate some mana when you're hit. This isn't as useful as you'd think, and the game seems convinced that you have enough mana to deal with the dozens of fucking Yak Men. Maybe you do if you're a student of the physiology and tactics of Yak Men, but I am not. And they're so big that I can run past several of them in a level without any trouble, wasting no mana or any of my glyphs, which, when the Demoness uses them, act like the mage's fletchets in the first game, releasing a cloud of toxic gas. The second hub takes place in Tibet, so it is at least visually different from the rest of the game, with some nice little snow effects. Expanding on how I don't know how in the bright blue fuck Yak Men work. Okay, I'm bored. Oh, shit, I picked up the staff of Emperor Lo Pan. Hey, I can relate, cause...
This really pisses me off to no end.
In the next map, there's the first thing I would call a real puzzle, which involves getting a prayer wheel and hitting 6 buttons in a sequence. The game shows you which Chinese character is which and gives you the order to press them in, so by puzzle it means you need to keep a pen and paper handy, or like I did, make a note on your phone with pictures. Same as I had to do with the fucking touch plate puzzle in Egypt, except this one doesn't change every time you attempt it. Next up, we have to get 3 jewels as an offering to Shiva, which is pretty easy until the game reskins the were-jaguars as snow were-leopards. They're just bringing the worst enemies into this, and I won't say that it's hard, because I blasted through this thing in 2 hours, knowing the levels about as well as I know Treasure Island Dizzy. So I grabbed the Eyes of Buddha.
You have not yet completed your task.
Right, the jewels. Really going all in on the Yak Man, aren't ya? No, fuck you. Off to the next place to cleanse my mind and body and do a test of strength that isn't really more challenging than the average room in Portal of Pravis. Then I wander around for a while getting frustrated, so I jump into a fire and, oh look, that's the intended way to progress. 2 jewels down, 1 to go, and the final one is the simplest. I just have to stop the Wheel of Time. That sounds like it would be complicated, but nah, it's a switch. Put the jewels in and a statue dances with uninterpolated frames. A door opens and we enter the Palace of Emperor Egg Shen, and you grab things to open doors and fight obnoxious enemies before finally reaching... Fuck! You fight obnoxious enemies before finally reaching... You fight obnoxious enemies before finally reaching 2 buffed golems that guard the final boss level, the Inner Sanctum of Pravis. He's not as hard as Eidolon. I mostly just dodge his nearly instant kill fire attacks and hit him with the charged Tempest Staff. He dies and the souls of the Serpent Riders are released. Wait, what the fuck? I just spent 3 games killing them and now they're just gone poof like a fart in the wind? Are you fucking kidding? And so concludes the Saga of Hexen. The Serpent Riders are free, there hasn't been a Hexen title since, and for some reason you can't even buy Portal of Pravis on Steam. Something to do with the rights issues between id, the publishers of Hexen 2, and Activision, the publishers of Hexen 2 Portal of Pravis. But you can totally get a physical copy off the internet for the low price of $119.95. Or you can pirate it because fuck Activision. I'm not suggesting that, though I fully endorse the fuck Activision part. And while I'm at it, fuck EA too.